Welcome to Popternative, where we dive into topical discussions from the worlds of pop culture, social media, and sports. Here is your host, Peter Remoliotis, aka PD Beats.
Hello and welcome to the Popternative podcast. It's the podcast where we have digital discussions, the worlds of pop culture, social media, film, TV, sports, everything really. As always, I'm your host, Peter Remoliotis. On Twitter, you know me as PD Beats. Well, I'm really happy I'm finally doing this interview because we've wanted to do this for some time now, and my guest is an actor, a comedian. You'll recognize him in several shows and movies like Dude, Where's My Car, Queer as Folk, Lab Rats. If you're into Disney Channel XD, we're with Hal Sparks. Hal, welcome to Popternative.
Thank you. Yeah, I cover all the bases. I learned very early on that if you weren't born into a Hollywood family, your only weapon is ubiquity. You have to surround everyone. So I'm basically on every channel.
Seriously, thank you for taking the time to come on and chat with me. I really appreciate it. And one thing that, if you could describe, your career, versatility, I think is a word. You've done a lot of different things. How important was that early on to kind of diverse yourself and try different mediums, Hal?
Well, I had always kind of assumed you got to do that, and it's not the case at all. I mean, most these days, everybody's into hyper branding and limiting, the scope of what your agent has to sell, whatever they can keep it in, in the smallest line as possible, And so, but I always, as a kid, I was like, I want to play that kind of role. I want to play that kind of role. I would love to do this kind of stand-up show. I'd love to, it just seemed normal, be in a band, whatever. Like, why would you limit yourself? But it's just not how the industry really works. But I was very lucky that my acting teacher in high school, because I was already doing stand-up, refused to let me do any non-dramatic roles. Like she's basically made me like, no comedy. You're not doing any comedy plays. You're not doing anything. If we have a play, you're the most morose character in it. And and that was to make sure that I developed a skill that I wasn't automatically, wasn't automatically getting a lot of stage time about,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, yeah, for people that follow you on social media, they see that, you play music, you do stand-up comedy, you're still acting as well.
Yep.
Are you able to pick, do you love them all equally? Or is there one profession that you like doing more over the others?
Oh, they're materially incompatible as art forms, so they are their own thing. There's nothing in it that makes me go, oh, this one's more satisfying than that. Because to me, it's, the analogy I like to use is, what do you like better, eating or breathing? And I bet you like one better than the other until you can't do it.
No, for sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it's they are different in entire, like, with a band is a musically collaborative, energetic experience, both the writing and performing of music, and it is different than acting, which is someone else's script that is collaborated with other actors, where in music I can pick what emotion I'm emoting in whatever song I'm doing. You could sing a happy song angry and get the point across to some degree. Acting, you cannot. You can't roll into work. This is one of the few areas, like, there are two areas where I think people don't understand the challenge of acting even more than just being okay at it. One is, you can't come into work feeling like you feel. So you any of us can go, like, if you're doing a podcast, you can be like, I'm pissed today, so today is an angry podcast, I'm going to start yelling about this. Or yeah, I think I was laughing my butt off before I walked in the door, so we're just going to giggle through this no matter what's coming up. You don't have that option as an actor. No matter what you feel, there's no way, like, oh, you're happy today, let's farm that for whatever the scene is. It's completely immaterial. Your own emotional state has nothing to do with your job, and it is often antithetical to it. It is the opposite of how you need to be, because you're fairly, you're working, you're happy. As an actor especially, you're like, oh my God, I'm finally working. Like, people get in this happy mode, and then they, like, I better be able to cry now. I'm doing, like, it's the first time I've been happy, and like, I'm working, and so you're not in charge of your emotional life as a job, which is extraordinary if you really externalize it and think about it. And yeah, and then stand up, the greatest thing about stand up is you are completely unreliant on anybody else, and you are all by yourself up there. And as long as I can make people laugh, I can talk about whatever I want. It is the only singular art form of them all.
So there's different things you like about all of them, basically.
Yeah. They are living beasts.
And you get to tackle all those beasts, basically.
Yeah,
as Hal Sparks, who is a beast of
right.
its own, right?
That's right, absolutely. And that sometimes, growing up as a stand-up, you wrestle with the extraordinary aspect of your own personality because, most people spend most of their time diminishing their own personality, tamping it down for the happiness of other people. That's normal life. Comedians, on the other hand, are the exact opposite. It is our responsibility to pick up that slack. Mm-hmm. So you start blowing up your personality and pushing the limits of what's acceptable within your own principles and philosophy. And you're in a unique world. Comedians are a very unique breed of humans.
Well, it's great that you bring that up because they're like a hallmark / like staple question on my show, because Popternative is about kind of the behind the scenes. I want to have the discussions that no one else is really having, right?
Sure.
We always talk about misconceptions, right? So I want to know, in your opinion, from your years of stand-up, what are some misconceptions about the stand-up comedy scene and culture? Are there some things that people are like, wow, like, this is so cool about stand-up comedy, and you're really like, wow, no, it's actually not like that at all. That is a total misconception.
It's almost the opposite. I feel like most people have this idea that comics are morose, broken, attention-seeking people. And there are certainly those among us, but that's not the norm anymore. That's more like that's left over from when being a comedian wasn't an actual job, like pre-60s. When really a comedian's only job was to MC something, be a vaudeville performer, or to introduce strippers, in San Francisco, and throw in some bawdy jokes in between. And then once, the Lenny Bruces and the Richard Pryors came on the scene and shifted the entire thing to a career. I mean, those of us that came up in the 80s and other people came up in the 90s, pretending that we have a hard time with our art like they did is friggin' insulting, quite frankly. And anybody who's like, I'm edgy, I do edgy jokes, I'm edgy, like you can't, there's no such thing as edgy comedy. There just isn't. People can get mad at you about a joke, and you can get, like they can boo or walk out. But Lenny Bruce and George Carlin got arrested for speaking. We don't live there anymore. So no matter what a comic says, like, yeah, look what I'm saying, you're like, yeah, you're really just messing with your economic bottom line, maybe that at worst, but you're not in danger. Don't pretend you're living on the edge like anybody else. So that being said, how do you thread that line? How do you be meaningful, and say stuff that's worth saying if there's no real edge anymore? Mm-hmm. And that's it. And I think it's because you internalize versus externalize. That's a whole nother thing. But I also don't buy it's about attention, because for me, it's a service job.
Do you think do you think that people try too hard to be like an edgy comedian? Like, do you think that happens sometimes?
Oh yeah. Well, that you can tell which ones are. Some are really good at it. Some are really good at pushing, the envelope, especially with social stuff. I think Stanhope is great at that. I think he naturally pushes that line because it's in his heart to do so. Mm-hmm. He does that naturally. I see dozens of comics, especially on, short shows or open mics, where they're just like, watch what I'm about to do. And you're like, this is going to be so ham-handed and stupid. And a lot of what people think passes for edgy comedy is just exaggerated, sort of a sense of frustration externalized, like, what the hell, you can't even blah 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 anymore, like, that's not a punchline, that's not a joke, that's just an act out by somebody who's frustrated. Well, a civilian can do that. Anybody can do that.
Have you ever thought about writing a book about your opinions on stand-up comedy? Because this is awesome.
I have. I feel like I should be older, but yeah. I've seen a ton of it, man. I came up in Chicago. I started doing it when I was 15. I'm a student of it. Anything you want to get it, that's the difference too. Is whatever you want to do. If you want to be an actor, musician, whatever, you need to study it, not just the class version of it. You need to absorb what other people are doing. Go, I agree with that. I disagree with that. Some of my best bits were written as rebuttals to other comedians that I philosophically disagreed with.
Mm-hmm.
I literally have one bit, where I call bullshit on something Stanhope said without directly doing it, and one where I did it with Louis C.K., where I listened to their bits and I was like, that's not true at all. That was my response as a human being. And I was like, and nobody's pushing back. Everybody, what happened is sometimes the strongest voice, people will dovetail behind it. So if you listen to every other comic talking about the subject, they're basically taking the same patterned approach.
Yeah.
They don't have an alternate view.
No, I totally see where you're going with that. So I want to shift gears. We talked stand-up comedy. I want to talk about more your acting right now as well. Yeah. And one thing I want to talk about is, of course, I'm smiling, but dude, where's my car, man? Zoltan. I mean, you've done so many. Zoltan. You've done so many things. You've done. Your resume is amazing. You know what I mean? Yeah. But you're Zoltan. Like Zoltan's on my show right now, man.
Dude, that's a huge deal. Like so I auditioned for Ashton Kutcher's part in Dude, Where's My Car? And the story goes that they already knew they were casting him because Philip Stark wrote it. He was a writer on that 70s show. He basically wrote that script for Ashton, right? Yeah. And so I'm like, I'm not getting this. I'm like, I'm not, there's no way. So, but they liked my read so much, they went back and reshaped the Zoltan character. Only had 2 scenes in the original script. And it was over his shoulder. It was like Dr. Evil. He was petting a white cat and you never saw him. And then they wrote in these extra scenes to kind of put me in the movie. Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of like, it just kind of magically happened. And they had the hand symbol that goes with it. They didn't know, they wanted his crowd to do something like the Vulcan salute, whenever they said his name, to make it physical, but nobody knew what to do. Yeah. So they put in the call sheet, anybody who can come up with what the hand signal is, will give you like $29.73.
Yeah.
And I took it very seriously. I was like, it's my cult. I should be the one to come up with it. So I went home and I just like worked on it all night. And I came back with 3 options. And the first one was too complicated. It was actually the 2 Spock things come together as a Z. Yeah. I'm like, nobody's going to be able to do that quickly enough. And ultimately, it was just easier to throw up a big Z really quickly. And so that's what we ended up doing. Flash forward friggin' 6 years, and the Pirates are doing it. Soccer players in Europe are doing it.
Well, Bob Clendenin, who's been on my show from Scrubs, who is, part of your cult, he said that the Zoltan photo is like the photo he's asked to do the most.
Yes, right.
But the thing you have to understand is, like, my sister and I, like, one of our biggest inside jokes of all time is when you're introduced, like, Zoltan and Jeff's playing that, like, techno beat, right? And, like, the drums come in and you're like, stop it. Like, dude, that is, like, the big... right. Like, my sister and I, that's our, like, favorite part, man.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Like, not a day goes by when we hear something like techno or electronic. Right. Like a song, like we'll be watching Stranger Things. They have this this 80s like totally. Song. We just think of Jeff Zoltan.
That's right.
It's amazing. And I mentioned, that you've like a lot of people, but you've called me out on Twitter for some stuff. You know what I mean? I'm always asking questions on Twitter. And one time I asked for Netflix recommendations, and you responded. You were like, "How about you go outside or like read a book or something?" And I was kind of like, "Yeah, you remember that? Don't act like you don't remember that."
No, I think it wasn't even like it wasn't simply like, "Hey, recommend something," whatever. It was like, I'm bored or something along the way. You threw it. It was something extra to it. I have to look it up.
And then my report was like, I'm sorry, this is not Lab Rats on a Disney XD or something. And then, right. Yeah. So, but that being said, I mean, you can't argue that those shows and that culture was so important for a lot of these actors and actresses coming up, man.
Of course. Yeah. Well, it's one of the reasons why I took the Disney show. over other options that I had that year. There were a lot of options that year script wise, but it was the only one. Like the Disney one had a couple of things going for it. One, it was organically funny. The jokes were about the situation instead of like making it up. Sitcoms have this terrible habit of putting people in a coffee shop, walking in some rando character with orange hair and doing 9, what's the guy with the orange hair jokes? Look at the nuclear explosion on that guy's head. And they're not organic. They made it up. They literally created a fake character to roast. And it's one of the most irritating, weak, like fallback writing crutches in sitcoms. And Lab Rats, the script had none of those. All the jokes were naturally extended to, what if kids actually had bionics? What if this kid actually met these kids like this? What would they actually say to each other?
Yeah.
It unfolded. And after, on Queer as Folk, we had to do the script word for word. There was no improv. There was no variance. Every was in the script. I would actually mispronounce words that were typos on purpose, just because the law was the rule was so strict. I was like, all right, you typed that way, that's the way I'm saying it.
Wow.
But on Lab Rats, Chris and Brian, who are our executive producers, and Mark Brazil, they encouraged me to come up with jokes. So I would pitch jokes, at the end, like when we were finished the scene, I'm like, can we roll back? I have a joke for this one line. I want to throw this in there. Can we throw in this bit? Can we try this bit? And they were really accommodating. And then eventually I became a director on the show and ended up directing 8 episodes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So was it safe to say that kind of your, like, what do you think kind of led to the directing aspect of it? Do you think it was what you mentioned about being able to like adapt and like write funny stuff for it?
Well, the writing stuff is not surprising because as a comic, I'm always throwing out jokes. That is natural. But directing is something I've always, done. I used to, one of the first jobs I had when I moved to LA was I produced these little segments for the Disney Channel, these little fake commercial spoofs. Mm-hmm. And it was for a show called Matumba, which was on the Disney Channel way back in the beginning of it on cable. And it was one of these things where like they ordered, 12 commercial spoofs, one for each episode for the season. And when I delivered them, I was editing on a Media 100 system. It was almost like editing on tape. It was like everything I could do. I wrote jingles. I threw everything against the wall to make these things good. And then I would deliver them. And I did 12 of them. They came back with another order for 64 for the next season. They wanted multiple ones each episode and extended episodes. And I was like, by the time I finished 2 seasons of that, I was gray. I had lived in my basement for like 2.5 years. And
that's insane.
Yeah. And so producing, directing, editing, that was always a part of what I did. As a comedian, you're an editor. You're constantly editing on the fly. And an editor is in many ways, a director thinks like an editor in reverse. I'm here delivering to the editor that I'm going to need for the cut I want. Right?
Oh, absolutely. I just realized something too, because you've done a lot of voiceover work as well. You're Tack, right? Did you do
Tack and the Power
of Juju?
Right.
Oh my God.
Right.
I just realized that. Yeah. It like diverse, man. It's insane what you've done.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of necessary. Like I said, you have to. If you weren't raised in Beverly Hills and go to Hollywood High School like half the cast of Friends did, mm-hmm. and you pack all your crap in your car and you drive to LA, what iron are you not going to put in the fire?
Yeah.
It really, I co-wrote and did, page 1 rewrites and got paid for a polish, even though, I was doing page 1 rewrites on scripts for Neufeld Ramey and Paramount. I was like, anything I could get a job doing in the industry that I could do well, because you do not take a job you will screw up, because that's a nightmare. And I would just dive in and do it. And it's been that way ever since,
What do you think? You kind of mentioned it a little bit, but for people that are looking to kind of get their feet wet in the industry of, writing, stand-up comedy, acting, like any of the kind of mediums that you've kind of been involved with, what's kind of some advice that you would give them? Because I also have a lot of, students and up-and-comers that watch the show, and I always like to kind of share some nuggets of wisdom for them. So anything specifically?
Totally. Well, music is very personal and requires your ability to focus on the same song more than anybody who would ever listen to it. So you've got to, get all in on, I'm going to hear this song 1,000 times before it's done. And just understand that's how you have to live as a musician if you're really crafting songs. And work on your instrument, both practice, take more instruction in your instrument than you need. Especially if you're a singer, because I lost my voice like 2 times on tour and was unable to protect it, and I almost lost my ability to sing. I've magically healed back to it and I can do it, but going back in time, I would have taken like hardcore singing lessons early to get my instrument tuned in. So that breath work and singing is fine. Acting classes, you will end up running dry after a while. You don't need them after a while. Acting classes are basically an opportunity to shed embarrassment for doing embarrassing emotions in front of other people. A lot of people have reservations about that they're not aware of. So you go do scene work and you practice being sad, happy, goofy, dumb, whatever, like those things where you're like, you're a tree. You're like, that's not an acting exercise. The whole purpose of that exercise is to get rid of your personal embarrassment. So that you'll at some point you don't need classes or exercises anymore. And if you still have to go back to your coach and your acting as they're not doing their job, you should be able to cut loose and act from that point on. Like, I don't think De Niro has been calling his old acting coach, since 1972 or some nonsense. Stand-up is about time on stage. You do not know the stand-up you can or will be until you have enough time on stage. And 5 years after you think you're awesome, you'll think, I can't believe I suck that bad. And it's true no matter, it's the only endless art form as far as growth. You can always be funnier. Singers can only hit so high a note. Guitar players run out of frets. Actors can only be so angry or so sad. You can see their tears and you can see their scream. Like, that's it. You can only do so much. But comedy, you can always be funnier. So it's a never-ending quest. And if you're going to be an actor, plan on being successful when you're 80. That's the goal, because that's the only thing that will get you through.
But also the job for like an actor, like what people don't realize, the job is auditioning, right? Like that is the job.
Well, it's developing a career over a long time. In the beginning, it's just auditioning, and there are tons. This is here. You want to talk about an unknown secret?
Yeah.
There are tons of actors who audition amazingly well and can't act for shit, and vice versa. There are tons of great actors who cannot audition, and it makes sense, because in an audition, it's a very presentational art form. Yep. The person I'm reading with isn't giving me anything emotionally to feed off of. It's not a cohesive scene between me and another person. It's presentational. It's like a book report. Some people are really good at that externalized form of it. But if you put them in a situation where they have to interact with somebody and genuinely feed off the emotion they're getting and really have a fusion in the scene, they can't do it. They're not capable of doing it. They can get it's like in Joe versus the Volcano. There's his boss at the anal lube plant where he works, in his hideous job in the beginning, is always on the phone going, I know he can get the job, but can he do the job? I'm not arguing that with you. I know he can get the job, but can he do the job? And to me, that's acting. There's tons of people who can get the job who can't do the job. There are tons of people who are amazing actors, but only in the situation where they have another actor in the audition to read with will they ever get the job. If they're reading with an assistant, they'll go, I don't know, it was a little wooden. Well, yeah, because I'm used to, breathing in and out. Most of my jobs have come through producers who know my work from other stuff. And literally go, we love his work, hire him. Because the audition process for me is very impersonal, mechanical, and soulless. There are plenty of people who work well with that.
Yeah,
anyway, so
that's true.
That's the other thing. And I would say this: prepare for your scene partner in your dream project to be awful.
That's
because a lot of people are like, this is it. We got the show, we got the dream gig. This is going to be awesome. And then your co-stars are drunk, or they're an idiot, or they're misogynist, or they're rude, or they have weird, like they're phobic on a ton of other things, or they have to call their agent every 10 minutes and threaten to quit.
so okay. I'm gonna ask a question then. Is that a
Yeah.
misconception as well, that all casts are become best friends after shows? Because
Oh,
you hear that
completely.
all. Because you hear that all the time, right? Like and it's great. You know what I mean? That people that are on a show for many years, they become best friends and everything. But sometimes it doesn't happen.
Most of the crowd will gather.
Yeah.
Most will bond, absolutely. Even difficult members of the cast member, because you've been around each other so much. But there's absolutely a misconception that it is an automatic kind of experience. And just like any other workplace, wherever you've worked, I guarantee there's two people where most of the people there are like, that freaking guy, or here she comes. And those two people exist in every work environment, including acting. So it is no surprise that there's the two you have to tiptoe around, and there's the two that are just jabbering in your ear when you're trying to do other work. And there's the goof off, who in the middle of something serious has to shake it off and be goofy for a minute because he needs to, for contrast.
Yeah, but I feel like the goofy guy, aka yourself, is kind of important too, like for those situations where it's like the sky is falling when it's not actually falling, and like people are just kind of at their wits' end and like freaking out all the time. You kind of need that comic relief. That's how I see it personally.
No question. Although, like my character on Michael on Queer as Folk, for example, one of the things that was recurring with him was that he would always be walking into a rake. He never saw trouble coming. He always walked into sorrow with an open heart. And it was a really difficult thing to portray, because at the top of the scene, I had to be like, this is awesome. No, it's not. And get stabbed in the chest. Well, that's easy to do once. Try reshooting it after you've been crying. Go back to happy. Go back to as open-hearted and happy as you can. Go back to, I'm not expecting this. And then have it happen again. And do that 45 times in a 6-hour period. That, there was a scene where my character got like outed basically to this girl at work, who was his friend from work, who thought they were, going to start dating. And then his best friend lets her know he's gay in the worst way possible at his birthday party. And it's this horrible scene, but it starts out with this party. He was having a great time. And then he finds out, he's invited her just to mess with her. And it's terrible. And we'd done this scene. It was a 2-day shoot to do this birthday scene because there was so many people in it. And at one point, I was sitting on the couch on set, sobbing, just uncontrollably. And the producer, Sheila, comes over to me and she goes, "Hal, are you okay?" And I went, "I've just been betrayed by my best friend 46 times in 3 hours. No, I'm not okay." And that's and I had to get that out. I had to sit on the couch and just sob so that I could get back to happy to do it again. I had to literally phase through that emotion, or I couldn't start from scratch.
Wow.
So that dream gig is going to come with some barbed wire attached to it, and you just have to be ready for it. You have to go, you know what? This cast is going to be awesome. I'm going to probably bond with 3 or 4 of these people for the rest of my life, but a couple of them are going to be horrid, and it's going to be tough. And there's a chance you might be that person. So you got to be aware of yourself.
Sounds like the zombie apocalypse, kind of barbed wire.
It's true on police forces. It's true on SWAT teams. It's true in medical groups where there's 2 point doctors in an ER and 5 nurses, and they deal with each other all day long. Mm-hmm. So there's any high emotion situation, you're going to have that kind of baggage, and it's better to go into it with a slightly guarded about that. And go there to do your job first.
No,
if
100%.
The relationships happen, let them happen magically. But don't go, this is going to be awesome. We're going to sing Kumbaya and blah, blah, because you'll be really disappointed.
No, for sure. Well, Hal, we'll wrap up, but thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Yeah, absolutely.
It was awesome to chat. And
Yes.
where can people follow you on social media?
At Hal Sparks on Twitter and Instagram, and of course my YouTube channel, the Hal Sparks channel, and then I do the Cameo videos, cameo.com/Hal Sparks. People like those; they're like gifts that people are giving, and sing a lot of happy birthday and stuff on there. It's really fun. But those are the main ones right now. I have a Facebook page, but I don't, my Russian's a little rusty, so I don't use it as much as I used to.
Yeah. For sure, man. Well, no, thank you so much. I wish you all the best, man.
You too. Absolutely, brother.
No, for sure. Well, this has been Popternative, youtube.com/Popternative for previous video episodes, Spotify, iTunes for the audio. And until next time, this is Hal Sparks and PD Beats signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to Popternative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popternative on YouTube. Be sure to like Popternative on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.